Hello class, and today we will be discussing nutrition and reproduction within the swine industry. If you remember before spring break, we had just finished talking about air notching in swine, and so we are going to work on finishing up our swine industry unit. If you have not gotten the guide notes for this presentation, I would recommend that you pause the video and get those and maybe split screen so that you can take those notes or write them down. So the first half we're going to focus on nutrition, and then we'll move into reproduction. So we have several different feeding phases that we will see within the swine industry. The first one we're going to discuss is gestation, which, as we know, gestation is when the sows are producing babies. So they are pregnant during gestation and working on producing babies. So these feeding rations are usually low in protein. They get about 4 to 6 pounds per day. And then fiber is also added to their diet for these in delivery, and as always, a good supply of fresh water should be available. So that is our first phase, gestation. Once the pigs are born in the sow farrows, then we move into the lactation phase, which lactation is when the pigs are still on the sow and they are nursing. So lactation diets are much higher in protein and energy because they need to meet those energy needs that the sow needs in order to feed all of those piglets. The amount of feed is increased then to about 5 to 7 days. So they will continue to increase them to full feed. And this really depends on the operation. So it can be full feed where they have a self-feeder, full choice feeder in front of them, or they get fed twice a day, about 5 to 7 pounds. So in the end, we'd like them to get about 12 to 20 pounds per head, but we will gradually work them up to that. But it changes between producer to producer, so that's why we have a large range there in the 12 to 20 pounds. And finally, lactating sows also require more water because they are technically feeding and watering all of the piglets, so they need water available at all times. Once we take the pigs off of the sow, they are in the weaning phase. So weaning diets are extremely important to the pigs because this is the first feed that they're actually going to consume. Usually producers will put some free choice feed within the farrowing crates when they are still nursing as well, just to get them used to it, and then they will slowly move them all the way over to only eating feed. These diets are usually very high in amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, and it is very important, this phase, for muscle growth, and in order to develop muscle growth, we need protein. So the level of protein is generally pretty high. About 18 to 22% is what we see commonly. Sometimes it can be up to 26%, but that's really on the high side. So what we would find in these feeds would be milk byproducts as well as blood proteins, and then our other things that we talked about in our nutrition unit, like soybean meal. And then as the pig grows, the level of protein are reduced because the pig's requirements decrease. So right now we're starting at the 18 to 22%, but as they get older, we're going to lower that percent slightly. They're not going to get lower than 14% usually. So, and then, like always, water is important. And then once they move out of the weaning phase, they move into the growing and finishing phase. So we can see protein levels from 14 to 18% there, depending on the end goal for the pig. the amount of protein in the diet is then gradually reduced. So we were at 22% when we were in weaning diets, and we're probably going to lower that then to 18 in our growing and finishing phases, then lower it to 16, sometimes even down to 14. At this time, we will feed our gilts and barrows separately because they need different requirements often, and our gilts generally will grow more slowly than the barrows and require more protein. So we will see, depending on the goals, different amounts of protein for different pigs. So this is the time where we would feed them separately. So we have our 4 phases, but then how do we measure the efficiency? How do we know that we are feeding them and they are actually eating it? I mean, obviously we're going to see them growing in the pen, but could we be more efficient? And the larger farm that we have, the more important this is. So we have 3 different things that we look at in order to make sure that our efficiency is as high as it possibly could be. So our first one is days to 230 pounds. So this measure reflects the growth rate of market hogs, and it is simply what it says in the title. How many days did it take the pig to gain 230 pounds from the day it was born? We want this day to be small. The fewer days on feed means that we fed them less total feed, which lowers our prices and increases our ability as producers to produce more animals because we have more financial resources to do so. So we want our days to 230 to be a relatively low number. Then we have our feed to gain. So feed to gain is a measure of how many pounds of feed are necessary to produce a pound of gain. So we talked about this a little bit in our nutrition unit. In order to find this, we have a nice little fraction over here that is pounds of feed fed divided by pounds of pork produced. So once we have determined how much pork we have produced, we can then use that to find our feed to gain ratio to ensure that we are being the most efficient as possible. So a lower feed to gain ratio is desirable since the pig requires less feed to produce more total pounds of pork. So again, we want our feed costs to be low. So for example, if we were to feed 1,500 pounds and we produce 1,000 pounds of pork, our feed to gain number would be about 1.5. So we want this to be a low number. And then the third thing that we'll look at is gain to feed. So opposite of what we just talked about, gain to feed measures the efficiency of gain. So we're going to see how many pounds we gave them and then divide that by the pounds of feed. Okay, I'm sorry. We're going to take the pounds that they gained divided by how much feed we actually gave them. So we want this to be a high number, unlike our feed to gain. So just to help you understand a little bit better, we have an example here. So if we had pig A that gained 20 pounds 1 week with 42 pounds of feed, and pig B also gained 20 pounds, but with only 35 pounds of feed, which one had the better gain rate? Obviously, it is pig B. So if we were to divide those numbers out, pig A would be about 0.5 and pig B would be about 0.6. But it's easy to see that with less feed, pig B gained the same amount of weight. So then just to help you visualize that, days to 230 should be that is incorrect, I'm sorry. Days to 230 should be a low number, feed to gain should be a low number, and gain to feed should be a high number. It should be right in your guided notes. I'm sorry that the slide is incorrect. So if we now move on to reproduction factors, there's several things that we need to take into consideration besides nutrition. So nutrition becomes a large factor in reproduction, but we also have some other things that we should consider as pork producers. So many of you know that the gestation cycle averages about 114 days for swine. So it is important to keep records to know when females will farrow and how long they should be in the farrowing crate. Also, we know that pigs can have a wide range of babies born per litter. So it could be 1 to 12, depending on how everything works out. So sometimes if a sow does a really good job and has 14 pigs, we will have to then foster some of those pigs off onto a sow that only has 6 pigs, to kind of divide those up so that we're not over demanding our sow that produce 14 pigs. So it's pretty easy to do that. We can balance those litter sizes by fostering pigs from larger litters to sows with smaller litters. And we should do this pretty soon after they're born, just so that both the piglets and the sow understand what's happening, and accept those pigs. So we're able to then get a more uniform weaning size because all pigs are able to eat, and it also increases the survival rate because they're able to get in and nurse. Whereas in a large litter, they may not get that opportunity. So then piglets are weaned between 14 and 28 days of age, and so that range exists because every producer is a little bit different. Most producers wean piglets from a group of sows on the same day to maintain the farrowing group. So if they farrowed on the same day or close to the same day, they'll also wean them on the same day or close to it. Sows will usually then come into estrus 3 to 7 days after weaning. And then most producers will breed the female as soon after weaning as possible to maximize production. So in pigs, since they have such a short gestation period, we're able to pretty easily get 2 litters out of them per year, and we just have to manage estrus cycles in order to do that. Artificial insemination, or AI, is extremely common in pigs. Producers can purchase semen or collect semen from their own superior boars so that no live coverage is needed, which is helpful in longevity of sows and boars when it comes to structure and things like that. So AI is extremely popular. A lot of places don't even have boars or a limited number of boars on their property. They are able to use the really good boars more often than if it was live cover, and then producers will determine which female is in estrus and typically AI them twice to make sure that they are bred. Sows usually have 3 years of productive life. Like I said, we try to get 2 litters out of them per year. In the show pig industry, it can be a lot different because we're usually not pushing them to have 2 litters per year. And if it's a really good sow that we'd like to keep around for longer, we would make it easier on her. But 3 years of farrowing is usually when we'll see a decline in productivity. So that is all I have for content for now. Please look at your assignment sheet to know what to do next.